Tonight's narrative is made possible by viewers like you and hover.com, an easy way to find and register a domain name. Use promo code REACH to get 10% off. And hello, everybody. Welcome to Narrative Live on a Thursday. It seems the third time's the charm there. Boy, it's been tough getting the show set up today, but we're here. We're here, and we're very happy to be here. We have a big show tonight. We're going to be talking about The Dragon's Tail again. We have the 6th installment tonight. What exactly happened to Guo Wengi after, people sort of started finding out what he was up to? We'll tell you the rest of his story, tell you more about Steve Bannon and about the organization they amassed to help divide and polarize America on behalf of the Chinese security services. All that is coming up in the second half hour of the show, so that should be a pretty good one. Eric, how are you tonight?
Doing great, Zev. How are you?
I'm good. I feel like it's all deja vu again because Boris Johnson is about to be the prime minister probably again in the United Kingdom. That may not happen, but
are they out of people there?
I just think no one wants the job. It's just a lousy job. Why would anyone want it? But it does sort of scare me a little bit because, for a while there, Boris Johnson was about as evil as Donald Trump was. And, well, not quite as evil, but as, approaching that kind of level of infamy. And we could have him back in 10 Downing Street. It's almost feasible that we could have Trump back in the White House at some point too, I guess. So it seems that people don't really learn their lessons.
Well, maybe there are more former KGB officers' sons that need to be elevated to the peerage, and Boris's job isn't done yet. But I just wonder if the great British people might have some other talent in mind.
They do. They have only a little bit.
I follow British politics, but not that closely.
Yeah, well, the last one only lasted 44 days. Ms. Truss, she's now officially, which is quite a thing to have, the shortest serving prime minister ever. Which is not necessarily what you want as your.
Twitter had a lot of fun with this one today.
Yeah.
Some tweets such as, "Who was the monarch when Liz Truss was prime minister?" Will be a great bar trivia question 50 years from now. I mean, I'm going, oh God.
Who is Liz Truss would be
that probably.
Anyway, here she is explaining why. I apologize for these edits here.
I don't think we're going to miss much of her. Don't worry.
We didn't like her. I mean, she met Biden. She said she didn't like the whole experience.
Not every job is for everyone.
We delivered on energy bills and on cutting national insurance. And we set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit.
This is the problem with Brexit.
Though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Oh. Now she actually, when she saw the king, he said, "Oh, you're back so soon." In a
did he really?
British, yeah. So he's only been in the job for a few weeks, and he's already gotten rid of at least one prime minister. So he's doing quite well.
The British have jokes; they have zingers.
Yeah, I mean, they're in a tough position.
Did you catch her chief of staff still has interest in a lobbying firm that represents Saudi Arabia while he's chief of staff for the prime minister? They don't have a FARA law in Britain, which is a shame.
Well, they're also compromised there, as is Boris Johnson. I mean, he is about as close to Donald Trump as can be in terms of his associations with Russia. I mean, he literally, I think, did he
Closer.
study? He served.
Medvedev.
Yeah. He served in.
He
He
elevated
studied or
the
something. I
son.
don't know.
Yeah, he elevated the son of a KGB officer to the peerage. He's the House of Lords or something. Yeah, it's a problem. But they're not just. It's not just Russia. It's Russia, Saudi, Emirates, kind of the same thing in a lot of different places.
But hugely corrupted, hugely, which is if he can get back into power, that's kind of scary in many ways.
There's more than 5 people that could do this, even quite conservative Britons. So I don't know. I have a guess that we'll move forward here around the world. I would be surprised if Donald Trump runs again in 2024, and I would be kind of surprised if Boris makes it back to number 10 Downing Street. But there's a fine line between being a strategic analyst and a gambler, and I like to stay on the right side.
It's a good one. So this was meant to happen today, but it did not happen today. We were meant to see the subpoena for Donald Trump. Sorry, 1 second. I'm having allergies today. It's one of these days. So we were meant to see a subpoena. It never happened, as far as I can tell. We're still expecting one. At least as a vote for the subpoena from the main house, I think was what they were looking to get today, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. From the Congress.
Yes, from the January 6th committee. Yes,
for the J6 committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
I should explain myself better. Yes, but that's exactly what was meant to happen. It never happened.
You literally have to, because there are so many different legal proceedings that this guy is part of: fraud suits, tax suits, state, the election thing down in Georgia. You got to be precise here, because I mean, I heard he gave a deposition at something to do with E. Jean Carroll, and
that also happened. Yeah, but this is different. This is a subpoena from the Jan 6 committee was expected. They took a vote in the committee itself, but they were meant to take one in the House, and that would have proved a subpoena then for Donald Trump. And it just hasn't happened. So maybe he's negotiating. It could be that he's negotiating that live appearance, as many people have discussed, or who knows what he's up to. I mean, God knows he's good at delaying things, so he might have found a way to delay this by a few more days. So there was no news there. However, Kevin McCarthy. Oh my God, my brain is not happening today. Kevin McCarthy was out there today saying that one of his key things he wants to do if he becomes Speaker of the House, is to basically start prosecuting the Biden administration the way the Congress has been investigating Donald Trump. That's not going to be the same, obviously, because it is not the same. But that's what we're facing if the GOP wins in the House. Is investigation upon investigation upon investigation.
Okay, well,
a lot of ifs there, though. Of course, they're going to win the
House
first. Yes, we'll see if that happens. In the most interesting news of the day that's new and unusual and different came this arrest of 6 individuals charged with conspiring as spies, basically, for the People's Republic of China. They operated in a very unique way. You know the story better than I do. It's called Operation Fox Hunt, and it basically entailed coming to America and pressuring American citizens who have Chinese origins to go back home.
It's not just in America. They're doing this in Switzerland. They're doing it in the UK. They're doing it in Germany. They're doing it wherever. If they have Chinese nationals that are on the ground trying to live their lives, and they're not serving the state, or they're saying things to their host nations that are pro-democracy, the Chinese Communist Party dispatches agents from MSS, chases down these individuals and harasses them, makes their life difficult, attacks them, funds those agents doing the harassment on the ground through a variety of covert means. And apparently America's seen through all of that. The DOJ has moved things from a counterintelligence posture to a criminal posture, and 6 individuals were charged in the Eastern District of New York, Brooklyn area, one imagines, and it goes right into detail on how they laundered money and how they coordinated all the way back to certain, not just the mothership in Beijing, but certain provincial governments, and just the intricacies of how China is executing on the ground espionage operations against the United States, but also taking advantage of our freedoms to crush the freedoms of others who come to this country for a better life. And,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
suboptimal.
in Toronto, they actually opened a police station here, a Chinese police station. So it's an unofficial police station, obviously, but it's run out of this by the CCP, and it's in Canadian territory. I heard there's the same thing in New York, where
And Doug Ford allows that to go on.
I mean, shockingly, but it's the same thing in New York, and residents there who are of Chinese origin are really nervous. I mean, you've suddenly got these spies operating out in the open, and in this case, quite horrifically, trying to get this guy to go back to China to face charges or whatever it was they were going to do over there. It's really this is how dictatorships work. This is why a Chinese Communist Party running the world. This is what it's going to look like. I mean, this is people coming into your homes at night, just disappearing them, traveling them around the world. This is really not. Sure. This is what it's going to look like under a new world order with the Chinese in charge. I mean, so for those people, and I keep harping on this, for those people who are voting for the GOP in any way in the next few weeks in the United States are really enabling China. They're enabling Xi. They're enabling Putin to continue to be, the world's worst leaders, and also the people who are inflicting, great amount of humanitarian damage on Ukraine. And also now you're seeing these human rights abuses around the world where they're literally sending in their spies to other countries, other sovereign countries, and basically kidnapping people. And there's an upper, and they were able to arrest 6 of these people, but I imagine how much more there are, especially judging by the scale of what they're doing there. So, I don't know how much more to make the appeal to everyone, and I'm sure all our audience is not really GOP audience, but a lot of them aren't. But it's lunacy to vote for the Republican Party, and it just proves what a short-term memory we have. Whether it's Boris Johnson or Donald Trump, we seem to have forgotten exactly how horrible the presidency of Donald Trump really was, and how much closer we'll be to that presidency if the GOP win the House. I mean, we are in a very precarious spot. I mean, people don't need to be reminded of this, but during Donald Trump's presidency, we had coronavirus, we had the destabilization of all our alliances around the world. We had our leader, the president of the United States, side by side with dictators around the world. It's, it was probably the most horrific theft of trillions of dollars from the U.S. Treasury we've ever seen. And it all went to the wealthy. This is all because of Donald Trump and the GOP. And if people can't remember 2 years ago, they should really remember how difficult a period of time that was, and how the world is not in any better a shape right now. That, all the outside indicators are indicating that things are much worse now. Can you imagine pouring a Donald Trump on top of that? There really is no time now for a GOP vote. And I don't think people are taking it that seriously, but judging by some of the reporting. Now, when you look at the actual turnout from the early voting and you look at the actual polling on the ground, it does look like the Democrats still have a very good shot of winning the House. But the reporting on a day-to-day basis seems to indicate that, the Republicans are in a bit of an upswing here. Certainly hope that isn't true.
Well, I haven't seen anything to that effect. What the one statistic is that's very strong is the turnout here is well beyond a midterm.
Yes.
And, we're going to assume that it's not, the electric magnetism of Missouri's Eric Schmidt that's drawing people out to vote, nor Kemp or Herschel Walker, because like the voting's off the chain in Georgia right now, early voting, and Rachel Bitecofer reminded of this, that the people who are registering to vote for the first time are overwhelmingly women.
Exactly,
and it's almost as if the abortion thing, Dobbs and Roe v. Wade, it's almost like that motivated them, because of course it did. This is a threat to their lives. So, you can, when you can see that in early voting and voter registration this early, this is a consequential election. And, I don't think it's just being motivated by boredom, or the magnetic personality of Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
I think when you get a noticeable, statistically important swing like this, It's because, somebody's done something politically either so good or so wretched that, people's behavior changes.
I think you're
And
absolutely
it has.
right. I mean, it sure feels like the abortion issue was enough to get a lot of new registered voters, and as you point out, those new registered voters are all showing up early at the polls around the country where there's early voting already going on. It looks like a massive turnout. So, it's going to favor the Democrats. There's no doubt it's going to favor the Democrats because there's just so many more Democrat voters this time round. However, the people are still.
There's another data point in there.
Yeah.
The U.S. attorney's offices in some very key states, Wisconsin and Alabama come to mind that I've seen go by. There may be more of these. In some key states, they are appointing like chief election prosecutors, overlooking, like in Wisconsin and Alabama, two offices in Wisconsin and Northern District of Alabama, I believe. They've got somebody on site who is just looking at election crimes now in advance.
That's really interesting.
They are, I mean, when you think about what we're looking at in Fulton County, Georgia, with how, with what those guys were doing, they were taking voting machines back to hotel rooms and stuff.
Right.
I mean, these guys lost their minds. They're just like, we're just going to make the election say what we want it to. And they did so, leaving a vast ocean of forensic evidence. And, we've got a Justice Department that looks very poorly on that. And they're like, we're going to have an eye on real crimes, not imaginary crimes. But if you guys anybody is seen with like a voting machine under their coat sneaking into a Motel 8, the U.S. Attorney's Office is on it in Wisconsin. Yeah. So watch yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think these next elections are going to be really well run, and they should be pretty fair. The ones where now we'll have all these MAGA candidates in some of these key voting positions in various districts around the country. That's a little worrying. That is a little worrying looking down the line. But I don't think those people are actually going to get elected. I think there's going to be a complete washout of those MAGA candidates. I can't imagine many more. Maybe the Arizona governorship might go to Lake, but otherwise, I just don't see too many MAGA candidates really.
Well, there
really
are countless local and state races where people of that ideology are still, the leaders of that movement have not been prosecuted yet. So until that happens, you're not going to burst the bubble there. What really concerns me are the people who are hostile to voting integrity, who are running for positions where they're going to be in charge of elections. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the one that worries me the most. Yeah, and that's going forward. It won't affect this coming elections, but certainly going forward, it would make an issue. We have a lot to do today in terms of the Dragon's Tail. I'm wondering if we just have a much shorter show tonight because I am struggling here with my allergies, but we have to take care of some business, and I'm going to do that if you don't mind. Now, Eric, you can stick around because I'm sure you're interested in domain names. I'm sure you're interested in occasionally.
I register domain names.
You do? Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Have you've had lots of good ideas. You're a good idea guy. I can tell. You're not one of these.
It's a mix.
No, come now. I can tell you pop out good ideas. Like I'm sure late night with your hang out with your buddies, someone has a good idea, you're on it. You've got some things that you want to, you know exactly how you to take it forward, and you've got a ton of different ideas. Now, most people are not like you. Most people have a ton of good ideas, and maybe they have one or two good ideas. They just don't know what to go do first in terms of starting their own businesses or turning it into reality. And one of the key places you now have to turn to first in order to get your business off the ground is to get a domain. You have to get a domain. And that could be quite complicated. I've registered a few in my day, and it's not as easy as you might think on most of these sites because you've got to get all these things together, all these sites. It gets very techy down the line. And there's one company that's doing a very different job with that, and it's called hover.com. And they make it quick and easy to find the perfect domain name for your business with over 400 available extensions, and with their connect feature. This is the big thing that they have. You can easily connect your domain name to many popular website builders with just a few clicks. Plus, they have free, this is great too, who is privacy protection. So your personal information is never published online, which means people can't gain that information and do whatever they might do with your personal information. So that's three great features why hover.com really stands out against the rest. Don't let the complicated search, sign up, and connection process of other domain providers stop you from starting your online brand today. Hover makes it easy to get started, and they're going to give our viewers and listeners 10% off everything that you buy at hover.com. If you use this domain name, hover.com/reach, that's hover.com/reach, and you'll get 10% off. You can also use the coupon code or the promo code REACH as well. That's REACH. So that's hover.com/reach. There you go. We got a new sponsor. It's nice to have sponsors. Thank you very much, Hover. Thanks for being here. You know what we also have tonight? And I don't even know what's in this episode because it's just been one of those days. But we're going to do part 6 of The Dragon's Tale. There you go. One of the things that I found really interesting as we started the show, you were talking about the indictments being handed out to those Chinese nationals. You know, it reminded me a lot of what Guo Wengi and Steve Bannon were up to with their G network and GTV. They basically had, as we mentioned to everyone in the last few shows, these farms, these ant farms of people, which were basically dissidents. So imagine this: you go and get dissidents from who are either in the United States, but also potentially in other parts of the world, could be still in China, who really want your help. You pretend to be an organization that is going to help these dissidents move to the United States, get asylum, and settle down. But actually, you're a front. You're actually a front for the Chinese spy world, and they're using you to leverage attacks against the United States. So they've got all these desperate dissidents, people are trying to get out of China, people seeking asylum, and they're all following this guy, Miles Guo, who set up this organization appearing to be a dissident himself, appearing to be the guy who is, who's critical of the CCP, but he's actually not that at all. He turns out to be a spy for the Chinese spy services. So in that case, all these people who were in that network are obviously now beginning to find out that they were used by Miles Guo and by Steve Bannon in a way that's quite dramatic. And in some ways, it was really horrific what they landed up telling these people to do. I mean, the easy objectives that some of these farms were given was, publish this on social media, push this line of questioning on social media, that kind of thing. But in some cases, it got actually quite physical. I mean, at one point, Guo decided that he was, going to attack all what he said were the fake CCP agents that were in the United States and Canada. And he just declared that these were now, these are not real dissidents. They're now basically what he is, a CCP agent. Like this guy, Tang Biao, in Vancouver, landed up getting beaten up by a group of Guo's followers, Guo's ants, who was sent on a mission to basically harass this guy and beat him up. And this was all carried on live streaming. So, you're talking about the Chinese obviously have a very different approach to life and to law and order. And when you see them doing the kinds of things they were doing to the 6 to the individual here who they were trying to get back to China, or when you see the kind of the assault that protesters had outside the embassy in London yesterday or the day before, I mean, there's a culture of real gangster beating up, hooliganism, but you name it, that there's really this is not America. This is not how we operate in the United States. And yet this is the long arm of the CCP reaching all the way from China into the United States over social media.
Well, okay, first of all, anything that has boots on the ground like that and somebody applying force, beating someone up, kidnapping someone, those are kinetic operations, or if, in the intelligence world, we call them black ops. That is, very nefarious, overt actions on enemy soil. China would never allow the United States to have Americans running around Wuhan beating up other Americans who wouldn't criticize China, who criticized America too much. Yeah. They would arrest everybody and possibly shoot everybody, anybody involved with the
Of
whole
course.
thing. And they take advantage of our freedoms over here to do stuff like this, to try and export their violence to us. And frankly, we've been letting them get away with this stuff for too long, and America's pushing back, and hopefully our whole systemic response will be like an immune system.
I hope so too. I mean, certainly Guo is still wandering around a free man in the United States, and as is Steve Bannon. And yet these were his, this was his legion of people that he had co-opted into his movement. And his movement now, which is, these are dissidents, many of them, maybe they're not, some of them, but a lot of them are dissidents who have been following G as some sort of GTV as some sort of, real network of information and not just a propaganda network. And now they're discovering that they were being used to do these hostile attacks on people online or people in real life. So that's something to keep in mind. And it flavors the whole of the Guo Wengi story with a lot of other mob-like activities, because when you look around Guo's world, there is just a lot of the mob shows up. People like Elliot Brody and Steve Wynn. And both of them were brought into the Guo Wengi story through a Chinese Secretary of State, and also a scandal involving the 1MDB scandal, which you will tell us a little bit about in a bit, I hope, because I really don't understand the 1MDB scandal. And then we'll explain to you how all of this ties into Guo Wengi and Steve Bannon. And it's also these Hawaiian mob family, basically, which was involved in creating this attempt to get Guo Wengi supposedly extradited from the United States. We'll get into all of that in a second. But first, let's talk a little bit about Wynn and Elliott. These guys are notorious for being in Donald Trump's inner circle. They were the chairman and vice chairman, if I'm not mistaken, of the President Trump's inauguration committee.
2016, no, it was 2016 RNC.
RNC, right. So these guys were responsible for getting all the money they could possibly get for Trump's election campaign and beyond.
Not just Trump, the Republican National Committee. That was the whole party. They had 2 Chinese casino owners there, 1 other Chinese money launderer, and Michael Cohen.
Wow. So what a group of people to have running your party. What a group.
One's dead and the other 3 are prosecuted from the 2016 GOP finance.
I mean, you look at them and you think that there's a group of mobsters there. I mean, that's just all you can see. So here it is, this happened before his acquittal last week, or the charges were thrown out. But Steve Wynn
dropped,
sorry. But Steve Wynn was requested by the feds to please register as a foreign agent for the Chinese. Has he done that? Has he, by the way, done that, or did he?
He has not, and the federal government has dropped their charges, and I think I can explain why.
Because I think we know why too. Yes, you'll explain. And so he's no longer facing those charges, but it doesn't mean that what happened to him and to Elliot Brody did not happen. In fact, it did happen that Elliot Brody was first approached by a Chinese vice chair of the security committee, which means he is basically in charge of the spy services in China. He reaches out to Elliot Brody and then later on to Steve Wynn in quite a dramatic way. And he's asking Elliot Brody, the deputy finance chair of the Republican National Committee, also the guy who paid off Stormy Daniels, by the way, if you don't recall that, on behalf of President Trump, obviously. So he asked Elliot Brody that, if he could arrange a golf game between himself and the president of the United States, because he really wants to get Guo Wengi returned to China from the United States, that they don't like his dissident activities and he's a criminal in the United States, and they would like to see him return to the United States. This doesn't jive with the whole thing that we've been talking about. Is he a spy for the Chinese? Then why would the Chinese government go to all this effort to try and get Guo Wengi to come back to China? I mean, they would have just recalled him. I mean, if he's their spy, right? I mean, they wouldn't have to go through this effort. So your analysis of this was likely it was not what they were doing, was attempting to convince the United States to keep, sort of a psychological negative thinking, reverse thinking.
Control both sides of the equation, and you keep Guo Wengi in there working with Steve Bannon. And, it's funny you mentioned that Elliot Brody pays off Stormy Daniels. They rolled out Stormy Daniels in early 2018 as the Mueller investigation got going. And, the whole Stormy operation there, getting Michael Avenatti and $10 million worth of free television time for that whole thing. I mean, it had nothing to do with any of the real issues of Donald Trump, for example, being owned by China, owing the Bank of China, a 9-digit sum, or having a son-in-law who basically is a Likud agent. I mean, it was just something to talk about that was easy to understand, fairly palatable, and not the point. So no doubt Elliot Brody was involved in this operation to throw up this chaff, with this shiny stuff for people to look at that was not the reality, which is massive foreign funding going through guys like him into American elections so that those candidates will sell farmland to Beijing near our military bases.
Do you think it's
rather
also
talk about an early 2000s porn star that many of the voters may have seen before?
But this idea of approaching Elliot Brody and Wynn and asking them for this ridiculous thing that the Chinese government really didn't want, I wondered if that's actually them trying to compromise Brody and Wynn by getting them engaged in what is an espionage act, and then telling them, and then I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just thinking out loud.
Sure.
Is this a way to say, hey, now you're involved in our espionage, so you can't testify against us?
I mean, I think he was compromised by taking boatloads of money from offshore.
Yeah, true.
That's the main thing. And then after that, we just go, hey, dude, could you tell Trump he needs to kick out Guo Wengi, and then Steve Bannon will tell him not to, and then we're good.
Right.
Because then it doesn't look like you have a bunch of Chinese agents, all around you, people who have taken Chinese money to launder through movies, or, their real estate deals, which is what surrounded Donald Trump. And, lobbyists for Huawei and ZTE and Hikvision. And that was the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the reality at the time. And it's in that reality in 2017 that Guo and Bannon were hitting their stride. The last thing they wanted as 2017 was coming to a close was that his visa would be taken away and he'd have to return to China because he no longer had a visa to operate in the United States. In that case, China would have definitely wanted an operation to try and convince the United States not to send him over because he was doing such fine work for them. And this was what they came up with. This is sort of a faux operation.
I think what China really wanted on the ground was Guo Wengi, who's a guy who could identify all the actual resistance to Chinese operations and who could tell members of the United States intelligence community and or her allies that about different Chinese operations and help bust them. Guo Wengi was going around identifying all the people that could do that for the U.S. government and who might be interested in doing so. So the Beijing wanted Guo on the ground here.
Yeah, absolutely. This was not an attempt to get him out. This was an attempt to keep him in. It was coordinated, as I said, through this quite complex group of people, which I had to study up who they were, and it's been a couple of days. So there's Nikki Lam Davis, who's sort of one of the biggest mobsters, I guess, in Hawaii. I didn't know they had such a scene there, but of course they do. Her family is well known for being in that game. She is connected to J-Lo. Tell everyone who J-Lo is, because
you mean Joe Tack Low?
Yeah, Joe Low. Sorry, not J-Lo.
I like J-Lo. I'm calling him J-Lo from now on, and that's it.
But he's Joe Low is a big figure in Malaysian crime.
Well, Joe Tack Low has been the bag man for one of the largest money laundering operations in the history of the world, taking Chinese money through Malaysia and spreading it far and wide. And I mean, this guy has been spending money on the Wolf of Wall Street, on art, on real estate, on boats, on everything, and just funneling that money into political operations all over the place. I mean, it's a stunning, breathtaking scale of a financial operation. It's supposed right now he's at large. People assume that Joe Low is in Wuhan, China.
Wonder why.
What could it mean? But meanwhile, one of his fellow bagmen from 2012. This is not just start with Mr. Trump
No, it
or when he
started in
comes
the
down the
Obama
elevator.
with Obama.
It was they were under investigation and then subsequently prosecuted for funneling Chinese money. We presume Chinese money is from the 1MDB, One Malaysia Development Berhad, short for that 1MDB, pile of money, gigantic mountain of money.
This is money designed to help Malaysia develop. This is development funds. They really took every little bit of Malaysia's future when they stole all that money and they invested it in things, as you pointed out, like the Wolf of Wall Street movie. I mean, it's kind of insane that so much of of Malaysia's future and potential was just taken by these mobsters.
Or rather, the money came from China. It went through Malaysia. It was never Malaysia's to begin with, and then it left through this guy, Joe Low. And oddly enough, one of the guys who helps, I guess, route the money, this has not been determined by a court to be fact yet, but this is what he is accused of. Pras Michel, who is a rapper from the Fugees, and this was not even on my bingo card, and mine is vast and stupid. It has all sorts of names and concepts on it. Dijon mustard, Mongolia, all sorts of stuff. But I didn't see the Fugees coming into this. But Pras Michel was apparently partnered up with Joe Tak Lo for the 2012 election, and candidate A that they laundered the money to was Barack Obama's campaign. It's not to say that Obama knew about it. In fact, the prosecution following so closely on the steps of Obama leaving the office sort of suggests that they knew that where the money would come from. And that is not a new thing. Foreign countries are always trying to get a foot into American elections. What was so amazing about, in the biblical sense of amazing, like, the 2016 election is the attacks were of such intensity and from so many directions that were just so unsubtle, that we get what we call the Trump era. But for decades, foreign countries have been attempting to interfere and dump money in and get influence in. It's really an old game here. But so Joe Low and Pras Michel apparently were allegedly funneling money into Obama's campaign in 2012. So
and when people don't learn their lesson, they keep doing criming. They keep going into the crime world. They find
until they're prosecuted.
Until they're prosecuted, they find themselves in 2017 there in a meeting with, this is the same guy from the Fugees and Jolo, and they have a meeting with Elliot Brody and his wife in Honolulu, I believe, and they decide that they're gonna get Guo out of the country because that is coming to them as a request from the Sun Lijun, who is a Republic of China minister in charge of safety and security. So
that means that connection there. So safety and security, the Ministry of State Security there.
Yeah.
You're talking about that is a top level intelligence operation here.
Yeah.
So all those people there, they are connected to Chinese intelligence, not Chinese corporations, not even Chinese triads or an intermediary. No, that dude is look at the picture. That dude is wearing a uniform. And that is when you get to the really heavy espionage charges in the United States, like 18 U.S. Code 951. Like if you're working for a guy dressed like that,
I mean, you're basically
you got yourself a problem if you did not register with the Attorney General.
If he gives you a call, maybe don't answer it, because not only was he a very powerful person within the Communist Party, but as you point out, he was the head of the very, very feared MSS, but also in charge of Macau and Hong Kong. So he would have known Steve Wynn from Macau, I'm sure, because they
might have known Sheldon Adelson too.
He might have known Sheldon Adelson. So there's, he has a meeting with them, or at least a couple of meetings on a phone call with them, asking them to try and get Guo out of the country by first getting him a golf game with Donald Trump, whatever that would have been about, I don't know. But Elliot Brody and his wife contact Steve Wynn, and here's how that played out. So I'll just pull up the same script here.
Real quick, do you know what city in the United States both Steve Wynn and Sheldon Adelson are from?
I do not know. I do not know.
Boston, Massachusetts.
Interesting. There you go.
And it's not just Chinese intelligence that has an interest in Boston, because they have MIT there and Harvard, but apparently, and if they hadn't killed Whitey Bulger so quickly once he was transferred to that low security prison, we might have been able to ask Whitey about what he thought about the Chinese triads moving in on the Winter Hill gang there in Southie.
That's a question I've been not dying to ask, but good. I'm glad someone wanted to ask. That's
Just
really interesting.
I'd throw it out there.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Let's take a look at, so Elliot Brody reaches out to Steve Wynn. Now they're in the service of the Chinese state security services. And he writes to Steve Wynn, hi, Steve Wynn asked me to send you this information to you via text. I have a number of items I'll be sending you regarding the fugitive Guo Wengi, protagonist of our story in the last couple of chapters.
Zev, who's writing this?
I believe it's Elliot Brody to Steve Wynn, if I'm not mistaken, but it doesn't seem correct because it says Steve Wynn asked me. So I'm curious to know. I guess I'm going to figure this out as we read through this because I do know this. I'm sorry I'm blanking out. This is a few weeks ago that I did this research, so it'll come to me. I think it's to Steve Wynn, but we'll just figure it out as we go along here. Asked me to send you this information to you via text. I have a number of items I'll be sending you regarding the fugitive Guo Wengi. The first is an Interpol red notice. The highly time-sensitive matter is that Guo Wengi's visa to stay in the U.S. expires on June 30th. It is critical, I think, that his new visa application immediately be denied. He must also be placed on the DHS no-fly list. The order would need to come from the very top, as Guo Wengi is well connected with former FBI who are on his private security detail. The president of the PRC mentioned to the president...
Hold on. Say that again. That again.
He says that the
order would need to come from the very top, as Guo Wengi is well connected with former FBI who serve as his private security detail.
Yeah.
I hope they kept in touch with their security officers back at the office, because they're probably informed persons, as we say. Yeah. That's very awkward. Please keep going.
So the president of the PRC, the Republic of China, mentioned all of this at Mar-a-Lago. You remember that Xi went to visit Trump at Mar-a-Lago in early 2017, and he apparently told him there that he would like Guo Wengi returned. And then the PRC Deputy Minister of Public Security, Sun Lijun, who we just showed you, met with me and requested help with regard to Guo Wengi. He promised to return certain U.S. citizens held hostage by the PRC. Listen to the things that they're offering. They were willing to offer citizens held hostage by the PRC and would accept a very large number of the illegal immigrants from the PRC for deportation back to the PRC. Finally, he offered new assistance with regards to North Korea. So, I mean, this is just that's a lot of espionage going on there. That's a lot of trouble these people were in. That's not good. You don't take offers like that from the PRC to anybody.
Let me tell you, from the legal perspective and the espionage perspective, the one phrase that stuck way out there is, I talked to the guy from Chinese intelligence. Yeah. A lot of these things, in being a foreign agent, whether you're a witting asset, an unwitting asset, whether you're taking money or not, there's a lot of different ways they can prosecute FARA, and we're definitely entering a new era of prosecuting foreign agency here. But one of the main things that kicks you up from, are you just doing some public relations for some state that you never really thought of it that way? Imagine, I don't know, a podcast or a Twitter personality carrying the water of some foreign power, taking money from an American, but really they're carrying the water of a foreign nation. That might be one kind of FARA charge if they want to get cranky about it. However, if you are the recipient of a written document or electronic message or whatever that says specifically, hi, I talked to the head of the FSB in Russia. I was just hanging out playing shuffleboard with the head of Saudi intelligence, and he'd like you to do this. And you do it. Woo! Now you're on orders from a foreign government. Now you kick up to 18 U.S. Code 951, just like our friend Tom Barrack. And it gets really awkward.
especially when they're offering you $75 million if you do the whole thing correctly. And, I mean, that's a lot of money, and certainly is the kind of money that you would only pay if you had that kind of money from a national state. I mean, I can't imagine anyone else offering anyone that kind of money to go on a little mission like that.
Tonight's narrative is brought to you by hover.com, which has not asked us to kidnap or deport any individuals from any other nation state.
No, they just are asking us to look up domain names, which is very nice of them. So this is the circle of interest around Guo, and you can see that these are not the kind of people you'd want to be associated with, generally speaking. I mean, you've got these casino guys, you've got Elliot Brody, who's up for a lot of criminal activity, you've got the head of the Chinese Security and Safety Services, you've got Joe Lowe, I don't know, I said J Lo, and you've got Nikki Lam Davis, who's a mobster herself, and then you've got the guy from the Fugees, who's also on trial right now for, funneling money into election campaigns for foreign governments. And so Guo most certainly is a person of global interest. He's someone
of interest.
Yeah.
He's a spy.
He's definitely a spy, but he's a spy in a lot related.
He's got to be one of the top MSS officers in the United States.
He's got to be. I mean, I would say he and Wendy Dang are the two people that are sort of ignored the most for some reason, even though they really should be paid a lot more attention to. It's just, for some reason, these two super spies, I mean, they're both super spies. They actually function in a world that is at the very, very top of society. And people do not pay attention to them nearly as much as they should. But
weird.
That might
why
change.
We're here.
That might change, exactly. So let's put a bow on the story, because here's Elliot Brody then in the indictment explaining what Elliot Brody then did with all this this letter that he had gotten from the Chinese minister, and he went something like this. He said, he said this. It says something like this. So on about the 26th of July, 2017, Elliot Brody texted Steve Wynn to meet at a hotel in Washington, D.C. to discuss Guo Wengi. Hi, Steve Wynn. I understand from your staff that you're in D.C. as am I, staying at the hotel. Would you like to have a cup of coffee today? Regards. Later that same day, Steve Wynn's spouse texted Elliot Brody, hi, can you text me the details again of the PRC man who you texted previously? Thank you. Elliot Brody responded, hi, you're referring to Guo Wengi or PRC Deputy Minister of Public Security Sin Lijun? Best. Steve Wynn's spouse replied, Guo Wengi. Elliot Brody then resent a message that he previously sent on June 27th, which is the one we showed you before. On or about July 27, 2017, Elliot Brody and Davis exchanged text messages regarding Guo Wengi. Davis texted Elliot Brody, and any word on embassy? Davis later responded, hey, any update about formal notice? Elliot Brody responded, I'm dealing with people in the National Security Council, emailing directly and awaiting response. It goes on and about August 19, 2017, Elliot Brody texted Davis several times. Among those messages, Elliot Brody wrote, urgent, call me, good news. Elliot Brody later added, I'm with Steve Wynn and have a breakthrough opportunity. And then on or about August 19th, 2017, Elliot Brody met with Steve Wynn on Steve Wynn's yacht. During their time together, Elliot Brody asked Steve Wynn about the matter involving Guo Wengi, and Steve Wynn suggested that they call the President of the United States together. Elliot Brody and Steve Wynn then called the President, asking about Guo Wengi's status within the United States.
Yeah.
So, what do you make of that? What is
dealing directly with the National Security Council on orders from Chinese intelligence? Well,
yeah, it's serious. It's damn serious, but it's also like they're being set up in some way, because it's kind of bad, but they're getting set up in some ways, because no ways anyone's ever going to put Guo on a plane out of the Trump administration, because
maybe they knew that they would be surveilled, and that would kind of give them a written record of them trying to do this thing, and then on the other side, oh no, because it also let's say they're dealing with the National Security Council, they prove they've got entree to Trump, and Trump is going to resist the Chinese government's wishes, then you kind of might look the other way on him owing them a 9-digit number. I don't know.
It could be something like that. Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's something else going on here that we're not necessarily seeing, but it doesn't look good for Brody and Wynne. As you point out, Brody, I think, was convicted. Was he convicted, Brody?
Oh, Brody's been convicted.
Yeah, but Wynne was charges were dropped because you suspect that there's a reason behind that.
Well, so it's funny. Fox News was carrying an update on the Pras Michel prosecution. They are going to trial in a few months, and so they are now getting down to motions in limine, voir dire, and they are presenting their lists of potential witnesses. Now, I grabbed the pacer and I'm like, that's interesting. Well, the headline, pardon me for going past the lead here, the headline on Fox News was that Leonardo DiCaprio is going to be testifying at the guy from the Fugees trial, and it was put under entertainment. I knew that it was not entertainment per se, though it does involve entertainment because that has to do with money from the 1MDB fund going to the Wolf of Wall Street and being laundered through there. So I pulled down the witness list, and I just want to read this to the audience because it's pretty neat. So you've got this is Pras Michel's list, and I just the highlighted names that stuck out to me are Elliot. He wants to call Elliot Brody, Ben Carson, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Jay Johnson, former head of Homeland Security, John Kelly, who was head of Department of Homeland Security, Secretary of DHS, as well as the chief of staff for President Trump at one point. Barack Obama, he wants to call. Jeff Sessions, he wants to call. Donald Trump. Pras Michel wants to call Donald Trump as a witness.
Sure, why not?
Guo Wengi, he wants to call Guo Wengi as a witness for him. I get the sense Pras is like, he's the least important guy on these charts. And he's like, oh, I know some things. You want, okay. Like, he's not getting a deal, right?
I don't know how important he is. I mean, he does seem to be the intermediary between Jolo and Davis and the Elliot Brody connection. So, I mean, he's certainly an important figure in terms of connecting people, but he doesn't seem like he's the most pivotal, powerful person in the story.
We don't know all the facts alleged here, but there's no trouble I could be in right now where I could reliably call, Obama, and company.
It's interesting you mentioned Kelly because he's also involved in this other story where Elliot Brody was trying to bring Guo Wengi, because when Brody was talking to people on the National Security Council, I believe he was talking about H.R. McMaster. I believe that's who he was talking about, because they did make an approach to H.R. McMaster, and they also made an approach to then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. And also through Rick Gates, which is another interesting name from the past. So they certainly were lobbying quite heavily for this $75 million that they were promised.
Well, the first list was Pras Michel's witnesses. Yeah. This is the government's list. Now, there's some overlap. And when the government put this out, it also dropped Steve Wynn's charges. So the names that stuck out here on the government's notice of witness list.
This is actually from Elliot Brody's case. I should point out, this is actually this is from Elliot Brody's case, not from Steve Wynn's case. Similar people and similar setup, but
it's not Pras Michel's case, but notice it's all the same. This is all the same Chinese money funnel. And it really hasn't come out yet. And Fox News is tiptoeing towards it with, Leo DiCaprio is going to be there. He's neat.
Well, we're not tiptoeing. We're going right for it. We're just saying
going
exactly
right for it.
What it is. It's a money funnel. It's money laundering right into American politics, and it's designed to corrupt our politicians, which it seems to have done quite a good job of doing. So,
here's who Merrick Garland's guys are calling for this thing. John Kelly as well. They're calling Steve Wynn as a witness.
Oh, interesting. Oh, so that's why you think his charges were dropped. Okay. I think
there's some cooperation there. The government's calling Steve as their witness. And so now they're no longer bringing charges against him. Sounds like there's substantial cooperation happening. The government's calling Leonardo DiCaprio, and I guess that is entertainment where I'm from. They're calling Elliot Brody as a witness. The government's also calling H.R. McMaster, and they're calling the custodian from Trump Hotels as a witness, the custodian from HSBC, which is an enormous Chinese mob bank, and the custodian from Leica Mobile, which is it's going to be a weird one for people, but it's a Sri Lankan telecommunications company that is involved in financing Brexit, in one of the largest money laundering scandals in the history of France, and some of Susan Collins's husband's old staff was tied up with Leica Mobile.
Oh, wow.
So that name just kind of popped right out at me.
Wow, that's really interesting. So yeah, that's probably why Steve Wynn is no longer facing those charges. And there's a footnote to the story, and and it needs to be told quite carefully. So I'm going to put up this full screen so we remember this guy. This is this Minister of Safety and Security under Xi for a long period of time. He was really a very well-known figure in China until about a month ago, because about a month ago was no longer in his job. Actually, he was taken out of his job even sooner than that, but he was a month ago.
Really?
This is where he was. He was in front of a Chinese court where he was being sentenced for life, with an actual sentence of 2 years, for being part of this political clique that apparently was competing with Xi Jinping, head of the Congress. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's really what upset Xi Jinping. And I don't know, it's hard to tell. I don't know enough about the storyline here, but it's bizarre to me that this man is the same guy who was involved in the Guo Wengi, 1MDB, you name it, scandal that was trying to get Wengi out of the country via Elliot Broidy and Steve Wynn.
So just as all these Chinese-funded American candidates are hurtling towards this election, we find out that like the Georgia Republican Party is using WeChat and selling China farmland near military bases, and we've got all sorts of stuff like that. And these prosecutions are coming in, and we're sanctioning China, and we're yanking our semiconductors out of China. We're saying if you're a Chinese American engineer, you're going to lose your American citizenship if you keep working for Chinese semiconductors. As all of that's converging, and the prosecution of Joe Taklo's people are still ongoing about funding American politics. Xi's government says, as to the guy who is coordinating all the American ops, he's in a clique completely apart from us. And I'm thinking of that Mariah Carey gif. I don't know her.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, it's very well done. I love the way you did that. But it's exactly right. I mean, this is what, the fact that they commuted a life sentence to 2 years is an indication that they're just wanting him out of the way for 2 years.
Yeah, they're not, because when the Chinese are angry at you, they shoot you in the head. That's kind of their.
So this guy's basically being told to park for a few years, so no one asks him any questions, and that they can deflect on him as much as they want.
That's right.
Same thing happened.
Put him in jail.
Yeah. Same thing happened with the Ang Bang guy. Remember the guy who was involved with Jared Kushner in episode 2 of
Kushner involved? Yeah.
So they, maybe this is how the Chinese deal with their operatives when they're getting too, the heat is starting to turn up on them, and that's clearly what's happened here, because the timing happened just around the Steve Wynn arrest and the indictment. So you'd think that there's something related to that, because no, we wouldn't dare, our government wouldn't dare bribe somebody to do something like that. But hey, that little political clique, that they might have done that, those bad people. So that's probably that's probably what happened ahead of the. So now we know what that coup attempt, or that so-called coup attempt, was all about in the few weeks before the Congress, when Xi was now re-elected for a third term. And we know the story of how Elliot Broidy and Steve Wynn were used, or maybe just volunteered, to be involved in a Chinese espionage plot to try and get Guo Wengi out of the country, but really to keep him in the country. It's an interesting story.
It's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, look, you've got the guy from the Fugees, you've got Leo DiCaprio, you've got Barack Obama, you've got John Kelly, you've got H.R. McMaster. This is the most interesting game of Hollywood squares we've ever played.
But as you point out, this, when we talk about the Dragon's Tail, what we really are talking about is the infestation of Chinese money, power, and influence into American politics on every level. And we've shown you how it worked around the Trump family. We've shown you how it worked around Ivanka and Jared through the nanny and through Wendy Dang. We've shown you how it worked through Rupert Murdoch's and Fox News, and how it still works like that today. We've shown you how it's reached the very many people around the White House during the Trump years. Everyone from Navarro to Bannon to Giuliani, all part of the same network. And we've shown you as well that there's a massive social media influence network of real people around the world, dissidents actually, who are being weaponized against American politicians. And now we've shown you that there's also this slush fund that's coming out of China through the mob in Hawaii and Malaysia, and is infecting American politics in that way. That's how broad and deep this Chinese attack on democracy has really been. It's hard to fathom, really, when you think about the scale of it and the cost of it. It must be, must be several, it must be almost, I would say, $1 trillion. It could easily be $1 trillion worth of influence that they've thrown at the United States.
And they're just feeding our own money back to us. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of their prosperity is because we sent them manufacturing gigs, and they developed with it and bought up all the champagne and bought luxury goods and then attacked us with our own money. And so now we'll just keep the money and we'll make the semiconductors in Southern Ohio, and you guys can go be the Middle Kingdom and just go have fun being the center of the universe, guys. Take care.
I like that. I like your version of events there. Well, that's the end of the show. Thanks for bearing with us tonight as I've been struggling through my allergies. But it was a really interesting show, Eric, as per usual. We'll be back on Tuesday. We're not sure what's happening on Tuesday's show, but there is more of the Dragon's Tale still to come. And there's other news that we'll be covering on Tuesday night. So hopefully you'll join us then. So from us at Narrative, don't forget you can join us at patreon.com/narrative and help support our independent journalism. And have a good night, everybody. Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives.
Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives. One day you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.